Sunday is Fred's birthday.
Oh, wow.
Uh, we should be going either on Saturday or Sunday up near you. We're going to
Oh,
go
yeah.
over to the Wheels of Time Museum. I've never been there.
Oh, very good.
And they're having it's like an anniversary um opening or something because they were closed last for about 6 months doing renovation.
Oh, really? Okay.
So,
Yeah, over in Maggie Valley.
hmm
Yeah.
that's the potential plan anyway.
Nice.
And we got a storm that's brewing over. Just heard some thunder and lightning.
Yeah, same here. So,
Yeah, see what goes on. What else is new?
uh, not much.
All the doggies and all the other animals okay?
Yeah, one of my big dogs had surgery, but she's recovering
Oh,
very well, and they're very happy with it. So,
what kind of surgery?
she had a tumor on her leg, and we had to have it
Oh,
removed. Yeah, but they said it was very slow growing, and she's 8, which is pretty old for a big dog. So they said that it won't come back. She'll be fine.
very cool. Hey, Sue.
Hey, here comes John.
All right. I was just
Here
talking to
comes John
Chris. He
round
said
the
he was
mountain. Here
signing
comes
off.
John. Here comes John. Here comes John round the mountain. Yeah, you don't
Harold, you
want to go
must be
this.
eating.
No,
No,
I'm done. Actually, I kind of like took my last bite just as I was saying hello to.
Well, I think then that you should give us your face rather than a blank
Oh, I
screen.
forgot.
yeah.
Sorry. There was, some people rather not
Hello,
see or hear
Chris.
me.
We're just
I mean,
talking
I'd
to
rather
the
not see his face because, like, I mean, it might break my screen, but we'll do the
Yeah,
best we can.
yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, we all know if Harold's blacked out, he's eating,
Correct.
despite
Typically,
what he
yes,
tells us.
yes, yes.
Oh, it's
He's
dark again
he's
today.
he's he's not into multitasking and allowing us to watch him eat his Chinese food or whatever.
It's
Yeah,
Well, he
probably
said he's
the-
already finished his dinner.
yep.
it's probably spaghetti and it like flakes and sucks it in the
No,
fries over
see
there.
the bowl.
So okay,
Where's my
Susan,
screen now?
has the weather warmed up any bit there?
Is it warm
Yeah,
here? Yes,
see the bowl is empty.
it's 90.
Oh boy,
Good night.
that's like 120 any place else.
right.
And it's like we're going to have a big storm late tonight
Oh
coming
my
Oh,
from the
goodness.
west.
hopefully.
Well,
Same
let's
here.
see. I'm going back to my favorite place in California to look at construction. Last year, when I was there in July, it was 117 in the shade.
Wow.
Ooh.
And I'm going 2 weeks in a row. I'm
Is it in
going next
Southern
week for an
California?
overnight. Huh?
Is it Southern California?
No, it's middle. It's
Oh.
east of it's northeast of Los Angeles, halfway between Los Angeles and Vegas.
What are they
Wow.
building?
Oh, okay.
They're rebuilding a Navy base in the middle of the desert.
Oh, that doesn't sound like such a good place for a Navy base. I thought they liked boats.
Not this one. This one, this base is like 40 miles by 40 miles square.
Wow.
They develop things that go boom.
Ah.
Well, then
Oh,
the desert is a good place to be.
I
Yeah.
think so.
Yeah. Base has been around post since around the Korean War time.
Wow.
In fact, the opening scene of Top Gun 2, is it 3? 2. was their airfield.
Oh, wow.
Harold, that also was
Oh.
a big training base too, wasn't
Yes.
it? Yeah.
How can you train in the Navy with no water?
Well, they
Airplane.
have to learn how to fly on dry land before they attempt a carrier.
Yeah.
Oh,
In
Oh,
fact, a
okay.
lot of the people we sell internationally, the Boeing fighter jets, they go there to train.
I
Yeah,
had
next,
neighbors who flew off aircraft carriers. I think they were lunatics.
hmm,
I'll tell you
yeah,
what, they're
actually, next
awfully,
week
yeah,
is
they're
supposed to be
awfully brave.
107.
They're awfully brave, Sue. You
Yep.
can't imagine what it's like even on a ship that's 1,000 feet long, in very heavy seas launching aircraft.
I have a hard enough time landing when I did fly on a stationary runway.
Yeah.
Right?
And Fred, since we don't
Yes.
get to see you on Sunday,
Mhm.
happy birthday.
Yeah.
Thank
Oh,
you.
happy
Oh.
birthday.
Your
Thank
birthday,
you.
I forgot. Happy birthday, Fred.
Thank you.
So you're
Thank you.
you're what,
Happy
20,
birthday,
26,
Fred.
27?
It's I wanted to stop having them, but they won't let me. So
Not your
No,
fault.
that's a good thing.
yeah. Okay,
Well,
actually,
Fred,
we
I hope you at least have one candle on your cake and you're celebrating.
yeah, one's enough. Yes.
Yeah, one's enough. Otherwise, it
Okay.
would overload the cake.
Right. Exactly. Yes.
Fire hazard.
And yeah, there'd be a fire hazard.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, actually, we have a special presentation tonight. So
I did
Okay.
my homework this
yes,
week.
yes. Rachel is going to tell us all about the biblical blue dye, the Techelet.
Yeah. So I got Megan to give me the admin privileges. So hopefully this will work and I can share my screen and hopefully you guys can see it.
Oh,
Okay.
And hopefully you're looking at my presentation and not at my calendar.
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
Got it.
we are.
Okay. So yeah, so for this is a piece of fabric that was the background here is a piece of fabric that was dyed and they think it was the Techelet blue. Um, so I guess the Techelet, the first sort of reference to it was in the Tel Amarna tablets, so around 1500 BCE, and they were it was talking about it was for a dowry. They were it was a gift to an Egyptian king, I guess. And so that it was Tefilti in the Egyptian tablets, but they think that's where the original name came from, is a beautiful color for the blue cloth. And then, of course, under the Romans, the creation of Techelet became increasingly restricted. It was only royalty could actually wear blue or purple coloring. And so the more it was restricted, then it became increasingly lost. And then with the destruction of the temple, that wasn't needed for large garments. It was just needed for tzitzis, and then so it just became increasingly less and less used until around about the year 600 is sort of the last time it's really kind of mentioned. And there's this passage in the Talmud where they're talking about that this person comes and he brings a piece of the Techelet dyed wool to kind of show them, and they're discussing it. And so the sort of the explanation behind this is, well, it must have been pretty rare if he had to bring it to the community to show them. So it must have already fallen out. Most of them must never have seen it before. And this person died around 600 of the Common Era. So that was sort of the latest that it's thought to have been in existence. So now we've had 1400 years or so without knowing how to produce it. And so there were two main practical problems in trying to sort of tried to start producing techelet again now that it's no longer under Roman prescription. We're allowed to do it. So if we wanted to do it again, how would we do it? And the two main practical problems are, what is the identity of the chilazon, the snail that the dye was derived from? And then once you know what animal to get the dye from, what is the process behind how to create it? And so there's some clues in the Talmud in different places where they're discussing different laws. Sometimes they're talking about the laws of Shabbat, and like if you went out and you were trying to extract the dye, they're sort of talking about like if you break the chilazon shell, then sort of how many offerings would you be required to bring, right? So this is sort of the background of the discussion. But during this discussion, they talk about, well, the chilazon, it's normally trapped between the areas of Haifa and Tyre, so the northern part of Israel along the Mediterranean. So that's where the snail lives. And then in another part, they make it very clear that the dye is not the snail's blood, but it's a separate secretion, and that once the snail dies, then that secretion that creates the dye really quickly goes from a clear to a darker color, and you would prefer to extract the clear if you're wanting to do this. And so that's another little clue. And that also the final sort of clue that you get is that the dye has to be color fast. Like once you dye the fabric, then it shouldn't fade or be washed out easily. And so Rabbi Herzog, who was the chief rabbi in Ireland and was later a chief rabbi in Israel, he identified this snail, which it will turn out is not actually the snail that is identified in modern times, but it's a beautiful blue color, and it does produce a dye, and it kind of lives in the general correct area. And so it seems like a really good candidate, but it turns out that the dye is not color fast, it can wash out. And there's also very little archaeological evidence that this particular snail was ever used to dye fabrics in the region. And so they had to reject that snail. And then, so it turns out that there's 3 other potential candidate snails. And they produce, these are strings that were dyed from the product of these different snails. And the hemostoma up here produces sort of a reddish dye. This is sort of a barbed snail, Brandaris. It produces this sort of pinkish dye, but Trunculus is the only one that produces a blue or purplish dye. And then something that gets a little bit confusing is that the genus was Hexaplus, and then it used to be Murex. And so you'll see both names in the literature. It's just a biological thing of once they did DNA typing, they found out, oh, we should put this in a different genus. So it doesn't have anything to do with our topic, but it's just a little confusing thing to get thrown in there that it's really the same snail. And if you go further back in the literature, you might even see it was originally assigned to other genuses as well. So if we just keep focused on the Trunculus, the species name, then it's all the same snail. So that's a little bit confusing. But it turns out whether it makes this sort of a more reddish color or whether you can get the bluish color, it depends on the ratio of indigo and then to the brominated indigo forms. And the more indigo you get in it, the bluer the color you can get. And so here is just showing like indigo has a structure that looks like this, and then if it could have one bromine on it, you get a monobromo indigo, and that produces sort of a more magenta color, and then the dibromo indigo produces more of a reddish color. And so here it's comparing the ratio of these chemical compounds that are derived from the snail to just kind of really make the point that the more you have of the indigo, the bluer the color you get. And so this snail, this Hexaplex trunculus, is becoming a very strong candidate for the Hylozoan because it's the only one that has enough indigo in it to produce a bluish or purplish color. And then these are some pieces of fabric that were found at Masada, and they're thought to be around the 2,000 years old from about the time of the massacre there. And they have looked at the ratio of indigo to the monobromo and the dibromo indigo. And they see, again, in the original Techelet, you have those three compounds, and it's the higher amount of indigo gives you the bluer color in this one over here.
Wow.
As I alluded to earlier, you find in the archaeological evidence, there's huge piles of these trunculus shells in places near dye manufacturing artifacts as well. And so it's thought that this snail was used a lot for that. So here's one that's kind of excavated out, and you can see the piles of shells in the background. And then here they are cleaned up and just kind of in a pile there. And what's interesting is that when they're looking at these shells, they sometimes find that they have this very specific hole drilled right here. And it's got an irregular shape. So it doesn't look like if the snail was eaten by another animal, they usually have very round edges, but this broken edge circle looks like it was hit with a tool or a rock. And that's right near the gland in the snail where the dye is produced. And immediately when you break the shell, it's a clearish color, but it very quickly oxidizes and gets darker within the snail. So this is all consistent with they wanted to get to the gland as fast as possible and get it out, and it's consistent with the description in the Talmud, which is talking about it's a clearish dye at first, but you want to get it when it's alive and extract it as quickly as possible, or it goes not so good. So anyway, lots of people sort of think that this is the right snail. This Hexaplex trunculus snail is the one that fits all of the candidates. And so then, given that, now how is what is the actual process for dyeing the fabric? So it turns out that it's really not that different from dyeing blue jeans. There's a lot of similarities. So the snail does not contain the dye itself. It has this indoxyl sulfate, or so tyre-indoxyl would have the bromine hanging off of it, and they use this. They actually like shoot out the substance to try to either, it's a toxin that either stuns their prey, or they might, if they're frightened or startled, they shoot it out to sort of defend themselves. But they also have in them this enzyme that they use to help break down their food. And inside the snail, the two would never meet in the normal course of existence. But when the snail is killed and it's kind of the cells are ruptured, things can get together, and then when this enzyme interacts with the indoxyl, it produces, or this indoxyl sulfate, it produces indoxyl, which is a precursor to indigo, and it also produces dimethyl sulfide, so this sulfur has to go somewhere. And this is a very smelly, terrible smelling chemical. And so a lot of people have talked about, like, when they have tried to recreate this process, the resulting fabric stinks. and they can't get the smell out. And so one person actually suggested that this might be a reason why there's so much incense burning and use of ritual perfumes, is because the clothing that's dyed with this dye just doesn't smell very good. Yeah, so once the indoxyl or the bromo indoxyl is exposed to air, it gets oxidized to either indigo or the bromo indigo, or it could be it could go to the dibromo indigo. And remember, again, that's the indigo makes the bluer shade, and then the more bromine it gets into it, it gets more red. So when you're trying to dye things with indigo, this is true for blue jeans as well. Like, you can't just put the indigo in solution and expect it to dissolve and then put the fabric in it. It actually is not soluble in its blue color form. And so you have to make a slightly basic or alkaline solution, so a little bit higher pH. And so one way that people might have done this before they had industrial chemicals is by adding things like wood ash or urine, or there's lots of crushed limestone in the Med region. And then it also turns out that the seawater in the Mediterranean is pretty high compared to seawater in other places because of the carbonate in the area, and also because it's a small basin and it evaporates and concentrates and becomes a little bit high pH, and that the pH of the Med water might actually be high enough to reduce the indigo into this leuco indigo form, which is clear or kind of a yellowish color in solution, but it will dissolve. And then when you put the fabric into the solution, it will actually take up the dye. And then, so here they have like jars showing where this could have been done. And there's lots of staining on the sides of the jars that are consistent with this. And so if you just dip it into the solution and pull it out, it can be sort of a purplish color because of the dibromo indigo that's in there. But when it's hung in the sunlight, the UV radiation from the sun can actually convert some of the bromo indigo to pure indigo. And so by hanging it in the sun after it's been dyed, you can actually get the really beautiful blue color instead of more of the purple or pink color. And so this chemist Elsner was sort of the first person to discover that you needed the sunlight to make the process go and actually turn it to the bluish color. And so there's a passage in the Talmud where it talks about you take an eggshell and you dip it into the solution of the dye, and then you dye a little piece inside the eggshell to test the color. And he's talking about this is to see if you've kind of like gotten to the right stage where the pH is right and everything is at the right stage where it will actually turn blue instead of a purple or pink color. And so this is just them recreating that passage. Okay. So I thought this was sort of an interesting story. This postdoc and one of her students decided they were going to try to recreate the process using only the tools and materials that would have been available. So they went out to Crete and kind of camped out and tried to collect some of these snails and actually do some dyeing. And one of the reasons was because it had been thought that the dye was so precious, only a very, very tiny amount could be pulled from a snail, and that it wasn't practical. There was no way that all of these garments and all of these fringes could have been dyed from this snail extract. And so one thing she was trying to determine was how much dye could reasonably produce, and also what the range of colors were that you would get if you just had sort of ancient techniques. And so again, they did discover while they were doing it that you needed to get the snail right away, kill it as fast as possible, and try to extract the dye, or it just turned into a gooey mess and was very difficult. And they found that the colors, it was very color fast, and in fact they couldn't get it off of their fingernails. They could never wash it away. They just had to wait till their fingernails grew out and then trim them off because it was such a good dye. And then so finally she found that in order to make about a half a liter or about half a quart of dye, it took about 100 snails. So it takes a lot of snails, but it's not completely unreasonable that it would be possible to be producing dye from these snails.
Mm.
So yeah, so all together, that's sort of the story, and I guess some people think that this is the real Chilazon, and that this is the process, and it's kind of the history is recounted in this book. It's kind of it's a pretty easy read. It's got big type and stuff, so you could probably read it in not too much time, but it's sort of interesting. And then these folks in Israel, they produce techelet with the traditional blue color using these approaches. And you can even visit their shop and see how they do it, and they'll give you a tour. Apparently, I haven't done it, but this is what I hear. And then you can and just see how they do it. So, yeah.
Whoa.
That's all I had.
Wow, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yes. As we would say in that service is Yasha Koach. Great presentation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I never realized this till you mentioned it that it had a bad smell.
Yeah.
It's, they say you only use one thread of blue for the talit. And I thought maybe it's because the blue is so expensive, all you can afford is enough to dye one thread. Maybe it's because of the smell. That never occurred to me.
Might
If
be.
you only had one thread, the smell wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
Well, and the other thing that comes to mind too is you wonder, number one, how big are these snails?
Yeah.
And
I think they kind of vary, but a couple of inches. Yeah.
oh, okay, so they're pretty good sized snails.
Yeah.
But the other thing is the quality control process to get to the end result.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. They have to keep testing it. They have their
Yeah.
eggshell.
No, that was good. That was excellent. If you could
Yes,
send that
it
out,
was.
Rachel, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was very good. That's something that, you wonder how you get these royal colors, and now you
Mhm.
understand it's driven by scarcity
Right.
and the process to
Yeah.
get
In fact,
there.
there's yeah. In fact, the purple supposedly was even more expensive than the blue. A lot of it was produced by the Israelites' neighbors to the north, in what is now Lebanon. But in those days, it was called Phoenicia, which is really from the Greek word for purple. And their
Mm.
economy was based on trading this purple dye around the Mediterranean.
Huh. Is that the Tyrian purple? Do you know? Is that what they called it?
I think so, because Tyre and Sidon were the two big city states in what's now Lebanon.
Interesting.
Okay.
So Tyre is
Anybody
now in
want?
what's Lebanon?
Yeah, Lebanon in the Bible is not a country. Now, the Bible talks about the Lebanon, but it's just kind of an area. And the only political entities, there were two city states, Tyre and Sidon. Those were the only two political entities. And Lebanon really wasn't a country really till around almost the 20th century.
That come about after World War I, or was it because that's when
I
all
think
of it
it
was
did. I think,
partitioned?
that Sykes-Picot Treaty that the French and British got together on, dividing up the Middle East after World War One, and France got Syria. But the French, decided that at least part of Syria, it had to be civilized, which meant French speaking. So they split off. So they split off a piece of Syria to make Lebanon, really, in the
Okay.
1920s, which is why there's been so much trouble. The Syrians never recognized that. And to this day, Syria does not recognize Lebanon as a separate country. It's kind of like China looks at Taiwan.
Yeah.
Syria considers Lebanon, a piece of Syria that was taken away from it. Yeah. But um, actually, it's interesting. The parsha that we're going to be reading, this coming Saturday, it describes something that's almost as strange as what Rachel was describing with making the dye. And this is the red heifer, which is it starts with chapter 19 in Numbers. And really, probably one of the strangest things in the Bible, this whole business about the red heifer. And it's in the first 10 verses of chapter 19, 1 through 10. If somebody wants to read
I
that.
got it. Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, This is the ritual, Lord, that Adonai has commanded. Instruct the Israelite people to bring you a red cow without blemish, in which there is no defect and on which no yoke has been laid. You shall give it to Eleazar the priest. It shall be taken outside the camp and slaughtered in his presence. Eleazar the priest shall take some of its blood with his finger and sprinkle it 7 times towards the front of the tent of meeting. The cow shall be burned in his sight. Its hide, flesh, and blood shall be burned, its dung included. And the priest shall take cedar wood, hyssop, and crimson stuff, and throw them into the fire, consuming the cow. The priest shall wash his garments and bathe his body in water. After the priest may re-enter the camp, but he shall be impure until evening. The one who performed the burning shall also wash those garments in water, bathe in water, and be impure until evening. Another party who is pure shall gather up the ashes of the cow and deposit them outside the camp in a pure place to be kept for water of lustration. For the Israelite community, it is for purgation. Purgation. I'm not sure what that is. The one who
Purgation
gathers
is
up the
that.
ashes of the cow shall also wash those clothes and be impure until evening. This shall be a permanent law for the Israelites and for the strangers who reside among them.
So it basically, you take this reddish, it's not really red, but the Hebrew is kind of means reddish, sort of a reddish brown, cow probably. And it's totally burned to ashes. And then the ashes are dissolved in water. And the solution you can sprinkle on people is called water of lustration or water of purgation. It's a way of cleansing people who are ritually impure. But the rabbis always try to find some kind of moral, even in the weird parts of the Bible. And one of the things that struck them was that everybody who participates in this, the priest and the guy who gathers up the ashes, and everyone who works on this ritual becomes unclean because of it. And then they have to go wash their clothes, and take a bath, and they're ritually impure, till the next day. And to the rabbis, they said it was an example of how many organizations you know of, who do a lot of good, but over the years it become corrupted. The people who run the organizations may be corrupt people, even though the organizations themselves may do a lot of good. And this would be kind of a parable of that kind of thing. Now, obviously, you don't use this, you don't sprinkle this on everybody for every kind of sin. It's specifically reserved for people who are ritually impure because they've had contact with a dead body. And then they describe that in the next really 11 verses, 11 through 22. So if someone wants to read that.
Sure, I'll go ahead. Whoever touches the dead body of a person shall be unclean 7 days. He shall cleanse himself with the water of the third day, on the third day, and on the seventh day, so he be clean. But if he does not cleanse himself on the third day, and on the seventh day, he will not become clean. Whoever touches a dead person, the body of anyone who has died, and does not cleanse himself, defiles the tabernacle of the Lord, and that person shall be cut off from Israel. Because the water for impurity was not thrown on him, he shall be unclean. His uncleanliness is still on him. This is the law when someone dies in a tent. Everyone who comes into the tent and everyone who is in the tent shall be unclean 7 days. And every open vessel that has no cover fastened on it is unclean. Whoever is in the open field touches someone who was killed with a sword, or who died naturally, or touches a human bone or a grave, shall be unclean 7 days. For the unclean, they shall take some ashes of the burnt sin offering, and fresh water shall be added in the vessel. Then a clean person shall take the hyssop and dip it in the water and sprinkle it on the tent and on the furnishings and all persons who were there, and on whoever touched the bone or slain or dead or the grave, uh, and the clean person shall sprinkle it on the unclean on the third day and on the seventh day. Thus on the seventh day he shall cleanse himself, and he shall wash his clothes and bathe himself in water, and at evening he shall be clean. If the man who is unclean does not cleanse himself, that person shall be cut off from the midst of the assembly, since he has defiled the sanctuary of the Lord, because the water for impurity has not been thrown on him. He is unclean, and it shall be a statute forever for them. The one who sprinkles the water for impurity shall wash his clothes, and the one who touches the water for impurity shall be unclean until evening. And whatever unclean person touches shall be unclean, and anyone who touches it shall be unclean until evening.
Yeah. So basically, this is specifically meant to cleanse you if you were ritually impure because of touching a dead body, which is rare for us. But you think back then, essentially there were no morticians, there were no funeral homes. If somebody in your family died, you had to help bury them. So there are very few people actually who at one time or another, would not have contact with a dead body. So this was kind of a big deal. This will be coming up very frequently, in Israel.
Well,
The
what
best
about,
historian yeah, go
Fred,
ahead.
what about the ritual where we prep the dead body? Does everybody who prepped the dead body then become impure for this
Well,
practice?
theory is supposing, as part of the ritual, you pour water, over the body, and you recite 3 times, "You are pure," "You are tahor," "You are pure," and so that takes care of the impurity aspect of it. Um, but the best historian of the Greco-Roman period, which is Josephus, said that this was regularly done all the way up to the year 70 of this era when the temple was destroyed. and there was no more priesthood, and the ritual stopped. But Josephus claims that even after the Romans destroyed the temple, they managed to save several containers of this, the equivalent of holy water, really, and it was still being used till the supply ran out, several years later. So apparently, it was really an everyday kind of ritual in ancient Israel.
Well, you could understand that because the villages were small.
Yeah,
They didn't have a
yeah.
large population base where they lived at the time, and you can
Mhm.
imagine it was brothers and cousins and everything else that was
Mhm.
involved in having
Yeah,
to prepare and bury a
yeah.
person.
And the other group that would have been involved was soldiers. Let's say you go to battle, and
Oh
here you
yeah,
are in a field, full of dead bodies. I mean,
sure.
essentially, everybody who went out to war would have to come back ritually impure, and go through a process like this.
So
So,
during
and then
this
with
7 day period, what happened? Were you ostracized from the group?
yeah, well, it's funny, this phrase, he shall be cut off from his people or cut off from
Yeah.
Israel, that occurs over and over again. And nobody's exactly sure what it means. There's a whole range of opinions. One is that he will be killed, but by the hand of God, not by the hand of man. The other is that during the time that you're unclean, you can't participate in any kind of ritual. Well, let's say it's Passover, at the time you're unclean, you're not allowed to partake of the Paschal lamb. You're not allowed, in a sense, to go to the Seder because you're ritually impure. You remember we read earlier on, I think last week or the week before, there was actually a second Passover. Because if for
Hmm.
some reason you were ritually impure around the
Ah,
time
okay.
of Passover, you couldn't participate. And so you'd have to come back, and hopefully you'd be pure again for the second time around. So it was a big deal. You couldn't go to the temple, you couldn't participate in any kind of religious rituals while you were in a state of impurity. So,
Hmm.
then it goes on with chapter 20. And here it gets really kind of downbeat. A lot of bad stuff happens. But here with chapter 20, it starts again with the people whining. Somebody want to read 1 through 8 on chapter 20.
Yep, I got it. The Israelites arrived in a body at the wilderness of Zin on the first moon, and the people stayed at Kadesh. Miriam died there and was buried there. The community was without water, and they joined against Moses and Aaron. The people quarreled with Moses, saying, "If only we had perished when our brothers perished at the insistence of our Lord. Why have you brought our Lord's congregation into this wilderness for us and our beasts to die there? Why did you make us leave Egypt to bring us out to this wretched place, a place with no grain or figs or vine or pomegranates? There's not even water to drink." Aaron and Moses, or Moses and Aaron, came away from the congregation to the entrance of the tent of meeting and fell on their faces. The presence of the Lord appeared to them. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "You and Aaron take the rod and assemble the community, and before their very eyes, order the rock to yield its water. Thus you shall produce water for them from the rock and provide drink for the congregation and their beasts."
So it starts off with we know that Miriam has died. And actually, there's a legend in the Talmud. It's kind of linked to the water thing because supposedly there was a magic well that accompanied Miriam wherever they went. So wherever they were, Miriam's well provided the water. And now, after the death of Miriam, the magic well is gone. There's no more water. So here they're complaining again. Um, and basically, if you remember when they first crossed the Sea of Reeds, the first thing they start complaining about is water again. We're thirsty, and here again we're going through the same cycle all over. But what follows really is, to me, one of the saddest passages in the entire Bible. The next few verses, it's 9 through 13. Somebody want to read 9 through 13?
Moses took the rod before the Lord as he had commanded him. Moses and Aaron assembled the congregation in front of the rock and said to them, "Listen, you rebels, shall we get water for you out of this rock?" And Moses raised his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. Out came copious water, and the community and their beasts drank. But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctuary in the sight of the Israeli people, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land that I have given you.
Mm.
Yeah, this really, basically what's happened here is, Moses is 40 years in the desert. Moses has been putting up with this for almost 40 years now. And at this point, he's getting toward the end of his life. He's really kind of a tired, frustrated old man at this point. And here the people are whining again, and God says, "Just go speak to the rock." And at this point, Moses has just had all the chosen people he can take, and for a minute he just loses it. Rather than speaking to the rock, he yells at the people, "Shall we get water for you, you rebel?" And then he slams his rod against the rock a couple of times. And, God still brings the water out. But essentially, what God's saying is, you represent me to the people. And when you act like that, you make me look bad. And the punishment is neither Moses nor Aaron is going to go into the promised land. This is why Moses can't cross the Jordan. There's a lot of rabbinic discussion about this in the Talmud. For a man like Moses, just to lose it for just a minute, it doesn't seem fair. The usual rabbinic opinion on this is, the greater the man, the higher the standard. Moses is being held to a higher standard than an ordinary Israelite. So even one slip like that, and he doesn't go into the promised land. And the following part starts tracing their further progress through the desert. If somebody want to read 14 through 21, the next 7 verses.
Sure. And Moses sent messengers from Kadesh to the king of Edom. Thus said your brother Israel, you know all the hardship that has found us. Our fathers went down to Egypt, and we dwelt in Egypt many years, and the Egyptians did evil to us and to our fathers. And we cried out to the Lord, and he heard our voice and sent a messenger and brought us out of Egypt. And look, we are in Kadesh, a town on the edge of your territory. Let us, pray, pass through your land. We will not pass through field or vineyard, and we will not drink well water. On the king's road we will go. We will not swerve to the right or to the left until we pass through your territory. And Edom said, you shall not pass through me, lest with the sword I come out to meet you. And the Israelites said to him, on the highway we will go up. And should we drink your water, I and my livestock, I will pay its price. Only it is nothing. On foot let me pass through. And he said, you shall not pass. And Edom came out to meet him with heavy troops and a strong hand. And Edom refused to let Israel pass through his territory, and Israel swung away from him.
Yeah. So when he says at the beginning, your brother Israel, it's kind of literally true. Edom is Esau's land. It gets his name from the Hebrew Adom, red, because Esau was a red hairy twin, and so they're kind of frenemies. There's kind of this love-hate relationship between Israel and Edom that goes all the way through the Bible. And you notice here, it's interesting when the Edomites refuse, they don't fight them. You'll see later on, there are a number of other people that oppose them, and the Israelites fight them, and overcome them and take their land. So even though Edom is kind of a special case because Esau was Jacob's brother, and so here they just kind of back off and go around. They don't want to get into a battle with the Edomites. The next part of the parsha is the death of Aaron, which is through from 22 through 29. Someone wants to read that.
Let me do it. I'll do it. Setting out from Kadesh, the Israelites arrived in a body at Mount Hor. At Mount Hor, on the boundary of the land of Edom, Adonai said to Moses and Aaron, let Aaron be gathered to his kin. He is not to enter the land that I have assigned to the Israelite people, because you disobeyed my command about the waters of Meribah. Take Aaron and his son Eleazar and bring them up on Mount Hor. Strip Aaron of his vestments and put them on his son Eleazar. There Aaron shall be gathered unto the dead. Moses did as Adonai commanded. They ascended Mount Hor in the sight of the whole community. Moses stripped Aaron of his vestments and put them on his son Eleazar, and Aaron died there on the summit of the mountain.
Mm.
When Moses and Eleazar came down from the mountain, the whole community knew that Aaron had breathed his last. All of the house of Israel bewailed Aaron 30 days.
Um, Actually, this is an interesting passage because the last part, they wept for Aaron for 30 days. This actually became a mourning custom even today. You know, when someone dies, you divide the mourning period into 3 periods. The first is Shiva, which is 7. You know, the first 7 days, the family sits at home and receives visitors. It doesn't go out. And this actually is from the book of Job. You remember when all of these disasters befall Job, you know, his 3 friends come to comfort him, and they all sit on the ground and say nothing for the first 7 days. Then the second phase of mourning is called Shaloshim, which goes up to the 30th day. After the 7 days of Shiva, you know, you can leave the house, you can go back to work, but you don't go to the theater or to the movies or to parties or anything. You know, there's no celebration of any kind until the end of the 30 days. And then the third phase is the first extends to the first year, where you say Kaddish every day, you know, until the end of that first year. But the Shaloshim part actually comes from this part of the Torah. It comes from the 30 days of mourning that they did for Aaron. And then they move on again, going around Edom. And the next part of the narrative really is chapter 21, the first 9 verses. Someone wants to read that.
Sure. When the Canaanite, the king of Arad, who lived in the Negev, heard that Israel was coming by the way of Altharam, he fought against Israel and took some of them captive. And Israel vowed a vow to the Lord and said, if you will indeed give this people into my land, then I will devote their cities to destruction. And the Lord heeded the voice of Israel and gave over the Canaanites, and they devoted them and their cities to destruction. So the name of the place was called Hormah. From Mount Hor, they set out by way of the Red Sea to go around the land of Edom, and the people became impatient on the way. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no food and no water, and we loathe this worthless food. Then the Lord sent the fiery serpents among the people, and they bit the people, and so that many of the people of Israel died. And the people came to Moses and said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Lord and against you. Pray to the Lord that he take away the serpents from us. So Moses prayed for the people, and the Lord said to Moses, make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who is bitten, when he sees it, shall live. So Moses made a bronze serpent and set it on a pole, and if a serpent bit anyone, he would look at the bronze serpent and live.
Yeah. So this is interesting in the sense that God has just commanded Moses to make a graven image,
Yeah.
which is a direct violation of the second commandment. And it's the second time that God does that. You know, way back in Exodus when they were building the sanctuary in the desert, God tells Moses to carve 2 cherubim, you know, and put them facing each other on top of the ark. And now he tells them to make this bronze serpent. And there are two explanations for this. One is that, that God can break his own rules if he wants to. So the commandments are meant for men to keep. God can break those commandments when, if necessary. The other is that maybe we're misinterpreting the second commandment. The rabbis were very strict about the second commandment. And because of that, there really was no Jewish achievements at all in painting or sculpture up until the 19th century. Practically nothing. Because, you were forbidden to make any kind of image of anything. And there's a more modern interpretation of that that the second commandment really means you shall not make any kind of image of anything in order to worship it. But it's not really a commandment against making any kind of image for any purpose. Overly strict about it. And, Jewish artistic creativity was kind of squashed for centuries because of an overly strict interpretation of that second commandment. The use of a serpent's also interesting because the ancient Greeks really had the same symbol for healing. The modern symbol in medicine is called the caduceus, and it basically comes from the Greek. It's the rod of Asclepius, which is a rod with two serpents. They had two serpents instead of the one. But it's kind of interesting in both cultures, the Greek and the Hebrew, the serpent for some reason was a symbol of. And you still see that Greek caduceus as a medical emblem, even today, the snakes wound around the staff. Okay. And then somebody asked, I think it was Rachel, I think it was you asked about, did they list all the places where they went?
Right.
Well, that's what they get into now. And these are some horrible place names, so I'll read the next verses. Starting with verse 10, they have this travelogue of all the various places they stopped. And some of these places, the archaeologists think they've identified. Some of them, nobody really knows what they were. The children of Israel journeyed and pitched in Ovot, and they journeyed from Ovot and pitched at Ejay Abarim in the wilderness, which is in front of Moab, for the sunrise. From thence they journeyed and pitched in the valley of Zered, journeyed and pitched on the other side of the Arnon, which is the wilderness that comes out on the borders of the Amorites. For Arnon is the border of Moab, between Moab and the Amorites. Whereas it is said in the book of the wars of the Lord, which is kind of interesting. Apparently there's a book of the wars of the Lord, and we don't have it. But the Bible, there are 3 books that the Bible mentions, which apparently were lost over time, we don't have, and this is one of them, the book of the wars of the Lord, which apparently didn't survive the ancient world. Later on, they'll mention the book of Yazar or of Yezer, and we don't have that one either. And then if you look at the book of Kings, every time one of the kings of Judah dies, they'll say, are not all his deeds recorded in the annals of the kings of Judah or in the annals of the king of Israel? And again, we don't have these books either. Apparently, these were scrolls that were just lost over time. And this is the first time the Bible mentions that. Okay. And then going on to verse 18, from the wilderness to Matan, from Matana to Nahaliel, from Nahaliel to Bamot, from Bamot to the valley that is in the field of Moab, by the top of Pisgah, which looks down on the desert. And of course, this means they're getting toward the end of the trip. It's on top of Mount Pisgah that Moses is eventually going to die. So here I've reached almost the end of the journey through the desert. And then it goes into a fight that they have with the Ammonites and the others. But the very ending of the parsha is really the first verse of chapter 22. It says, the children of Israel journeyed, and they pitched in the plains of Moab beyond the Jordan at Jericho. So it really means across from Jericho. They've already reached now the eastern bank of the Jordan, across from where Jericho is, which would be in the south of Israel. Jericho is a little bit south of the Dead Sea. And this is really the end of the journey. This is the last stop, before that Joshua is finally going to lead them across. So the journey is really over, but there's still a bunch of things that happen to them before they actually go across. And then that starts with the Parsha next week, which is Balak. So the next week's Parsha actually starts with chapter 22 and verse 2.
Awesome.
I'll be gone for the next 2 Tuesdays. I'll be in California.
Oh,
Boo.
In the desert,
Well,
the
actually,
desert, yeah.
but I'm only going like for
stranded
next
in
week.
the
I only go
desert.
for one night, and then the week after I go for 2 nights.
Well, you can relate to all of this.
Yeah,
A lot of traveling over the next 2 weeks.
right.
Well, be safe, Harold,
Yep.
especially
Not up
out
to
in
me.
California.
You
Yeah.
got it.
Well,
Okay.
thank you
Well,
all.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Fred.
the
Happy
class, man.
birthday
Thanks,
again.
Rachel.
Yeah, happy
Okay.
birthday, Fred.
Hey, thank you. See you next week.
Gang.